Hi, this is your host, Lori Moilov on the Limitless podcast. And today I have an amazing guest with me, Elan Carson. And I'm so excited to have you as a guest because not only are you a screenwriter, author, TED Talk speaker, you're also a Swiftie. And for those that don't know what a Swiftie is, those that do, they know all about Taylor Swift. and I guess let's go into like some of the things in your work history and what you've been up to. I know that you are also a copywriter and you're from Detroit, Motor City, and you've written two books, The Millennial Mentality, More Than Memes, Cats, and Mishaps, and then you've also written The Willow Tree. So in those pieces, you kind of talk about being a millennial. Also, you talk about mental health. I was wondering, Elan, if you can kind of go into mental health and how that coincides with creativity.
Yes. And first off, Lori, thanks for inviting
Yeah.
me to your podcast. This is so cool. This is so cool of you. I'm so excited to be here. So just all the gratitude, appreciation, and love.
Aw.
And just shout out to all the amazing things that you're doing. I love the intro that you gave me. So I can't wait to hear your new music, like 22 songs this year. I know you mentioned. So
Hey.
hey.
I'm excited about it.
Yes. So yeah, you were asking about just mental health and that
Mhm.
journey in my writing and the intersection of that and my artistry. And it's so interesting. I know like prior to us recording, we were kind of talking about what I've been doing for maybe the past year or so. And I had mentioned how and look, I got my little buddy
Aw.
here, my little cat peeking in. He wants to say hi to everyone. um, no, so it's so funny because I was talking about how like, around last summer I had a particularly triggering event that
Mhm.
kind of just had me put the brakes on a lot of things in my life, not
Mhm.
in a way that's like um not in a way of like procrastination or I'm gonna stop doing anything and like hide
Mhm.
away, but in a way that was like I have some wounds from childhood that
Mhm.
I need to focus on. And if I keep like sweeping this under the rug, I'm never going to get anywhere, or this is
Mhm.
just going to explode and end in a way
Yeah.
where I was going to end up hurting myself.
Mhm.
And, I had already attempted suicide back in college, so almost a
Mhm.
decade ago, and had got help then.
Mhm.
And I thought that I was healed. And I didn't
Mhm.
realize that there was just so many more layers to unpack
Mhm.
until I had this particularly trying event last year. And it made me realize how much more I had in there. I'm like, wow,
Mhm.
like healing isn't a one and done process. It's
Yeah.
really, it takes time. And I've just been learning how to be patient with myself and have self compassion and love myself unconditionally.
Mhm.
Um, so it's been a journey, and that's something that as I'm slowly working my way back into writing,
Mhm.
and I guess for context, so I would spend a lot of my days writing,
Mhm.
like there were days where I would just unplug my TV and write. That's it.
Yeah.
Um, and when I shifted to focusing on my self care of like, okay, let me try EMDR, let me try
Mhm.
neurofeedback, let me talk therapy, let me neurocycling. Like
Mhm.
I was just reaching for any tool to protect my mind. I
Mhm.
realized I had to momentarily take a step back from writing to like
Mhm.
get my mind right.
Yeah.
And so now as I'm slowly like getting back into writing and like just incorporating my experience, the journey that I've gone through. And so yeah, I um was diagnosed with PTSD after I
Mhm.
had this triggering event, and I reach out to a psychiatrist. PTSD and ADHD, which can
Mhm.
go hand in hand. Um, the PTSD was, that was the bigger thing. And
Mhm.
it is, as I've been learning more about PTSD from even just reading like The Body Keeps the Score,
Mhm.
or let's see, there was another book by Oprah and her partner Bruce, What Happened to You, that talks about
Mhm.
developmental trauma. And so, because normally when people think of PTSD, they think of like war veterans coming back
Yeah.
from war, and there's so much more to that. I like the way that Thais Gibson, she describes PTSD, and I'm sure she may even be quoting someone else, but the way that she describes trauma and how it can lead to PTSD is trauma being something that happened to you or something that should have happened to you but didn't. So, like, for
Mm.
example, your parents should have spent time with you, but they
Mhm.
neglected you, or
Mm.
your parents hit you, so something did happen.
Mhm.
And so with complex PTSD, that's where we get a lot of things in like Western culture in America, and I'm sure all over the world. I say America because that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Of like growing up, so complex PTSD versus like war veteran PTSD is you are experiencing trauma after trauma after trauma. It's like sustained event one after the other. It's not like
Mhm.
a big car crash
Yeah.
and you like have triggers from that. It's like you have continued childhood
Mm.
abuse that's like really, dragging out and lasting. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, that's something that I've had to confront and that
Yeah.
I'm now putting into my stories as a screenwriter.
Mhm.
Is like, man, I have not seen it yet. Just a really powerful story of like a woman of color struggling
Mhm.
with PTSD from childhood development. And
Mhm.
because I love shows that are like dark in nature and
Mhm.
also like have an underlayer of comedy, because I think for me, the best way for me to cope sometimes is to laugh about things. And so
Mhm.
I love shows like tonally like Fleabag or
Mhm.
even Succession. And so kind of like capturing that tone in my story with like a lead Black woman is something
Mhm.
that I haven't experienced yet. And something that I'm working on in a new piece.
That's so cool. And I'm so excited for you with this project. I'm like, ABC, are you guys ready for picking up this series or what?
Yes,
Right? I'm putting it out there for you.
yes.
Right?
Thank you.
My one question for you, like in the process of writing, and there's a lot of listeners here that are from all over the world. You mentioned, we're just in the States over here, but we have some amazing listeners in the UK. So shout out to our UK listeners and
Yes.
also in Australia and in Africa. So all over the world. And some of them are interested in getting into writing. Maybe they just like haven't had the courage to find their voice, because I feel like everyone uniquely has a voice to share their stories. What are some of the tips you can give some of our listeners? Just like you when you started writing your books, the Millennial Mentality, or even the Willow Tree. Like, what were some of the things that initiated you getting your pen to the page or typing on the computer? What
Yeah.
were some of those tricks you did?
Yes. So for me, I heard kind of like two different questions in there. So I'll
Yeah.
answer both. As far as finding your voice, I like that was a lot of experimentation. So I always encourage people to just be open to experimenting. Like growing up, I loved writing poetry and
Hmm.
I just
Me
loved
too. Snaps. Yeah. Poems.
and I love like playing with lyrics. I love flowy writing. I was very flowy, very like show office. I like imagine if I were like a gymnast, I was the person doing like double tuck rolls, pyramids, all of it in my writing, my work. and, and then I decided, I was like, you know what? I want to try. I want to try longer form writing. I want to jump to journalism. And
Mm,
so I did journalism for a little bit. And I particularly started gravitating toward fashion journalism because I'm like, oh, I
mhm.
like stories and I also like showy. Um, and then I started writing short stories because I'm like, maybe that's what I really like.
Mhm.
And so it was finding what medium best express what I wanted to tell. And of course, that later tracked to novel writing and screenwriting. And screenwriting is really like where my heart is now. It's
Mhm.
the path that I'm
Yeah.
pursuing, like the path I'm meant to be on. And so
Yeah.
there's that element to finding your voice. And then as far as like the courage to put like pen to paper, for me, that's a real thing. I was chatting with two writers yesterday of
Mhm.
like finding what works. So it may be like one of the writers was like, I carry a portable like typewriter with me. For
Mhm.
me, I literally, for whatever reason, opening up my laptop, like the whole process of like opening up, powering
Mhm.
on, plugging it in, like seeing the white screen, that
Mhm.
is really intimidating for me. I will never
Right.
just grab my journal and write. And so I have like blank sheets of paper that I will just write on, and I can be as
Mhm.
big and sloppy as I want. I can scratch things out. There is no like when you have like Word open, you can delete or erase, and there are multiple Word documents. And I think I just enjoy the mechanics of having the physical paper and like spreading it out and seeing the
Mhm.
sheets and like having different color pens and paper. And so it's, or like the person I know who has the portable typewriter. So I think,
Right?
maybe voice memos are your thing where you like
Yeah.
voice everything into like, the app on your phone. So I think it's also finding that. And lastly, which I'm sure you're a big proponent of, it's having like the right support group in your corner.
Mhm.
I was talking to one actress writer. She's like, yeah, people just are telling me I shouldn't do this anymore. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like
Mhm.
who are these naysayers in your life? And like,
Right?
why are you giving them any like weight? Like, what do
Mhm.
you want to do? And it was so
Mhm.
funny because a couple of days later she reaches out to me and she's like, I just made it to the quarterfinals in like a competition. And I was like,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
told you. I told you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Like, especially in the creative space, whether you're writing, whether you're acting, whether, you're an artist drawing, I feel like you have to find your people. So, it's finding your tribe. Can you tell me a little bit about that journey of finding your creative tribe? Like, how did you like kind of find those that kind of, because I feel also in the writing space, sometimes it can be isolating because you're in a room, maybe typing or on your notepad. um, how did you kind of search out and find, your fellow creatives to, help champion each other?
Yeah, I think that is more of an organic process.
Hmm.
It's in um because not all creatives are supportive of other creatives, which I've learned
Hmm.
as well. You talk to one creative person about your project, and then for me, I've gotten really skillful at listening to the words that people
Mm.
will use around me. And I'm like, oh, this sounds like they're kind of like putting me down. I don't
Mm.
like that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, who are the people who are building me up? Not from a place of like, being a, how do you pronounce it? A sycophant or like just a yes man, like, not
Mm.
from a person who's just
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, that's good, whatever." Like,
Hmm.
'cause no one needs that, but, like, a
Yeah.
sincere person of like, "Hey, you know what? I like your comedy chops. I can see this is going somewhere. You need some
Hmm.
development in this area, but keep
Hmm.
on this path." So, like,
Yeah.
honest, like, dedicated encouragement.
Hmm.
So just keeping an eye out for that, and I'll always ask myself, like, do I think this person came from a malicious heart space with their
Hmm.
critique? Or do I think they came from like a place of, man, they really invested in my project, took the time to read like 60 to 100 pages of mine,
Hmm.
and they seem to be encouraging me to keep going. And so I guess that goes hand in hand too with
Hmm.
writing because it is a very like feedback oriented space.
Yeah.
And some people can feel very like, it hurts when you get like feedback or critique. And then you realize like, wow, this person really just spent like maybe 2 hours out of their
Hmm.
life with my work. And
Yeah.
like that's dedication and
Hmm.
investment. And if they're here to like build me up, like, maybe all right, maybe they're saying like I can improve my voice in this way. And then it's like, all right, like let me find some resources to see how I can like work on landing a joke better or
Hmm.
work on story structure. Or maybe it's like, oh man, I need to like make this character stronger. Like the last note that I got actually a couple of weeks ago was expanding the world in my story.
Hmm.
And when they like broke down why that was important, I was like, oh wow, this is
Hmm.
actually a really helpful note. So
Yeah.
I know I kind of segued into critiques, but I think that's important in the community aspect
Yeah.
of writing. So because when you're writing in a vacuum, there are things you can miss, but when you
Hmm.
open yourself up to a community of writers and you realize that we're all here to like take each other's work to the next level, it's
Yeah.
finding the people who are going to tell you the truth, but who are also going to do it in a loving way and who
Hmm.
are just, gonna I've had people like literally, God bless them, like drop everything they're doing. I'm like, a person just reached out to me. They want to read my sample tomorrow. Can I send this to you like now to get notes? And they're like, all
Yeah.
right, let's do it. So
Oh,
like,
that's awesome. Yeah.
yeah, and they know that I would like do the same thing in a
Hmm.
heartbeat. So
That's
um
so cool. And I think like especially on the feedback, like I think a lot of creatives, you can take the feedback. It's just also how you receive it and then how you respond to that. Like just like you're saying, like you took the note and you're like, okay, I'm gonna work on, maybe creating more, building out this world, from that feedback. And so I think like especially in the writing space, script writing for sure is feedback is so important because it has to go through multiple layers. And I know being a previous script reader of several scripts, you know, they're very time consuming. So yeah, having that appreciation for the reader
yes.
because it takes a little bit of time to depending on how many pages is it like is it a pilot or is it like a or a pilot with several series of scripts or is it like even a features longer so yeah it's
Yeah.
that
And a feature can easily be 120 pages.
yeah
Yeah.
and that like I guess like for creatives who are maybe just like they have this script idea right and they're like I can so see this as a movie but just like you were saying lift opening up the computer or just getting that start what are some recommendations you have like is there a method you said you have like pieces of paper do you use note cards how do you kind of like um put your scenes together maybe some beginners, people who are starting that are listening to the podcast can kind of gain some knowledge from your process and maybe help them along their process.
Yes. So, and I will say, stop me if I go too fast, because I will get that from my mom. She's like, slow down. My mom's like my best friend.
Mm.
Um, so this is gonna sound uh, these things that I'm saying, beginner students may have already heard. And it was
Mhm.
something that when I heard as a beginner myself, I kind of brushed aside as like unimportant. And
Mm.
then it wasn't until after like a couple years later going back and I'm like, oh, I really should have listened to that.
Mm.
So I will say, start with a log line first. This is
Mm.
specifically for screenwriting. Start with a log line. And that has helped me in so many ways. Like, ugh, I can't even describe it.
Yeah.
And so there are different layers. I'm gonna like just shoot off everything first, and then I'll go back and explain why.
Mm.
Log line, beat sheet. Like make sure you do a solid beat sheet. I now do that
Mhm.
before I even jump to the outline. Before I would just start with the script, and that was really murky, really dangerous. And what happened? I ended up working on the same script for a year because when you just write everything out, you're so excited and you're like, yeah, like I don't need to log line, beat sheet, outline. I'm just going to start writing. Bad news, bad news, bad. Stop that right now from doing it. Because what happens is ideally how a story should work. And I loved how someone described this. If you take one scene out, the story falls apart. So that's how like well engineered a story should be. So if you start from the script and then you get notes on one scene, you take that scene out and then you're trying to re-engineer the whole story after you've like constructed it. It is a mess. So it's easier, however, if you start with a beat sheet, which in my case just looks like bullet points. So it's like I will just get like the main nuggets of the story. So it's about maybe 2 to 3 pages of just like bullet points. And then I will send that out to my writers group to get feedback on. And they're like, this like one sentence, it could be like, Elan buys balloons for Ziggy's birthday. She's trying to impress this guy for his birthday. And then it could be like, Elan shows up to surprise Ziggy with balloons, shows up to his house uninvited. He's in bed with another woman, blah, blah, blah. Elan.
The plot.
Elan waits in her car sobbing with the balloon. The balloon like accidentally escapes out the window as she tries to grab it. I don't know, something dorky. I'm making something up. And so, and whatever, you can keep going. And so it's just bullet points like that. And then, so you're not writing out the full scene, and then you send this off and then they can say, oh, what if like the balloon flying out the window, what if we like do a little gag there? And so then I'm changing like just a sentence on a sheet, not a full scene that's already like constructed in a script. And then it's like, okay, if we do a gag, then where else in the story can I like have this running gag with the balloon? And then again, I could just go through all the bullet points and I'm like, oh, I could do a gag here or whatever. And so you see that in comedy where, you know, they'll keep a gag running for it. And so it's much easier to maneuver of just like changing things on bullet points versus swapping out fully written scenes with dialogue.
Yeah. So true.
So true. And then so from the beat sheet, I go to the outline phase. My outline phase is different than others' outline phase. So you have primal works for you. So in screenwriting, you have action line. Of course, you have the scene heading like day, night, location, etc. So you have the heading. Then you have the action lines, and then you have dialogue. So the way that I do that's a script. And of course, it's little things like some people have transitions. You can use those sparingly, etc. So for my outline, what I do like the scene heading, the like day, night, interior, exterior, etc. location. And then just the action lines. What this looks like with the action lines instead of the dialogue, and why this is significant for me is I was reading in the book Cinematic Storytelling, which talks about directing, how screenwriting is a visual art first. And so, and I like the tip, can you follow a movie if you had it on mute? And if not, that means there's too much exposition. You're explaining way too much in your dialogue. So if you notice with all the good movies, all the classic movies, like take your Star Wars or Unforgiven, or even like you could do it with like Marvel does a really great job. Titanic, if you just like watch the movie and put it on mute, can you follow everything that's happening? And you can. And so in the action lines, those are where you give the like, for me, how I use it, the body language of the character, the dynamic, what you're gonna see, because that's ultimately what's gonna get translated on screen. And then when I go to script is when I work in the dialogue, which is like the last piece. And sometimes I'll do a couple of rounds where I'll just do all exposition dialogue, and then I'll go back and then I'll work in more nuanced dialogue. I'm like, oh, that's too on the nose. I'm like, how can I make this more in line with the character? And a really great tip that I learned, and so I did UCLA's TV writing program, which is, if you can cover up the name of a character on a script, can you tell who's speaking?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so that's how like distinct you want to make each character. And distinct as far as like speech patterns is someone more verbose versus is someone more just like, are they a one word, two word person? Is someone the subject matter, who's talking about what? So even with Tick Tick Boom, it was really interesting to track, which was really fascinating. It was like John's character, the lead character, Jonathan Larson, who was he talking about, or what was he talking about to whom? And it was like, okay, with his girlfriend, it was all about moving. So it's like, okay, so if you were to cover that up, it's the girlfriend, you wouldn't even have to like know, like, okay, this is her. And I don't want to give spoilers away to the movie.
Yeah.
So I won't say any more about that. But there was he broached different subjects with different people, and I thought that was a really great way to approach dialogue. And so that's my process from logline. And I'll circle back. So with my recent project, I was actually in the middle of doing a beat sheet, and I realized I didn't have a solid log line. And so without that, I was like, I'm not even sure where this story is going. And so with the log line, and this goes hand in hand with really great note that I got from a woman at ABC, Adrian, who's my mentor. Shout out to Adrian.
Adrian.
Adrian on ABC's talent and development team.
Amazing.
And she said, she's like, Elan, you have to think of stories for pilots. In terms of old world, new world. And this translates into the log line. And so old world, new world is, you want to set that up within the first 10 pages. And it's pretty much the old world of the character and then the new world that they're now stepping into. And they can't go back to that old world. And you see this all the time across all stories, even books. And the best example, I'll give you two, both in the comedy space, is Schitt's Creek. So think of the future. The old world, you see them in like this mansion where like the FBI is raiding it and taking away the furniture. And like minutes later, they're in a podunk town. They're now in this new world. And there's no going back to this former life of glory and wealth that they had. So, and it was pretty epic how they set that up literally. Like the goal was 10 minutes and they set that up in like, I want to say 5. Like that's how quick it was. And so the log line for that is, and I like starting my log lines off of when, of course it can start it off however, but when a wealthy family gets raided by the FBI, they're then forced to relocate to this podunk town in the middle of nowhere and carve out a new life for themselves. And so you can see how that like transitions perfectly in the log line. You have the old world, new world. How is this going to like unfold? So knowing that story ahead of time, you want to know the story you're writing ahead of time. And so for me, for my story, I'm like, what does my character want? Does she really want to go on a date with XYZ guy? And is that going to be the story? Or does she want to plan a surprise birthday party for XYZ guy? And I was straddling the line. And all of this you see plays into this toxic relationship that she has with her dad. And so because she can't have the relationship that she wants with her dad, she latches on to liking this guy that she just met. And she wants to do everything that she can to like impress him. And I was struggling to figure out, okay, is she trying to impress him in what way? It's really important to be specific. because that could be the story engine. So
Mhm.
like every episode could be what's a new way for this lead character to try to impress this guy.
Mhm.
So even getting down to the specifics is super helpful.
Wow, like I feel like our listeners have gained such a amazing structure of how you approach, your writing. And definitely I know that they've learned some tips from like the beat sheet, focusing on log lines, creating that structure. The one thing I want to ask you that I ask all my guests is what is that one word that you kind of coincide with creativity? What would your one word be?
Yeah, the one word that I would say coincides with creativity, and that is so hard, because I'm such an indecisive person and I want to give you like a paragraph of words. Um,
Fair.
if you
I guess
I
get to the
don't
log line. Alon, get
get
to
to
the
the
log
log
line.
line, the elevator pitch. This sounds so like cheesy, but I sincerely mean it, love.
Mm,
Because if you do not love what you're working on, like even the
mhm,
story, I met with another exec from ABC,
mhm,
and she was saying how people will pitch her stories that they think she wants to hear. And
mm.
she's like, no,
No.
I want to hear something that you're passionate about
Mhm,
writing. Like that makes a difference. So
mhm,
love the stories you're writing, because if you
mhm.
don't love them, then what's the chance that the other person will? So
Right?
love the story that you're writing and love writing. Like put so it takes it. This is much more than just like putting words into a page and making sure
Mhm.
it's like formatted correctly. You
Yeah.
have to like love it to the point where sometimes it's hard for me to turn on the TV because I know my mind isn't going to watch a show for entertainment value. I'm like picking apart scenes. It becomes homework to me. Um,
Uh,
so I'm like, you have to love it so
mhm,
much where you are like going to bed at night, like just ruminating on, oh man, maybe if they had tried this or that or that.
mhm.
So love. And then also I
Yeah.
think that goes back to the idea of self-love and having
Mhm,
compassion for ourselves too. And sometimes I was the type of person who would put a lot of pressure on myself to perform.
mhm.
Having self-love, if there's a day that you're unable to get to writing, recognize that's okay.
Yeah.
You can pick it up the next day. That's
Mhm,
totally fine. So there's an element of self-love too, and respect for who you are, and giving yourself a break if you need that creatively to focus on your mental health. So love.
Yeah, I love that word, as you know. And
Yes.
also, one of our previous guests, she also mentioned love. So I feel like right now, love is in the lead. But
Yes.
I totally agree with you. Like, you have to have that self love and also that love, which is that passion that keeps you going with your creative endeavors. And, to all of our listeners, keep going with your creative endeavors. And it's okay, just as Elan said, if you have a day that you took off and you're like, oh, I didn't work on my craft that day, it's okay. You can jump back and get right back to it. Alon, where can some of our listeners come? Our limitless listeners, they might want to come follow you, maybe check out some of your books. Where can they find you?
Yeah. So my website is Elan. That is spelled ELAN.
Mm,
My middle name is Marie
mhm,
Carson, like the city.
mhm,
.com. So that's my website, and you can check out samples, things I've written, and then also I believe there's a link to my TEDx talk,
mhm.
and it's my same at Elan M Carson for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, um, even LinkedIn. Feel free to
Mhm. Yeah.
hit me up on LinkedIn. I do have blonde hair in some of my photos. I know I'm rocking the purple today. I like to switch it up. So same person, it's me.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alon, for being on the Limitless podcast. And to all of our Limitless listeners, keep being creative, keep diving in. You're limitless with your creativity and keep shining. So thank you so much, Elan. And you're just a shining star. And I just can't wait to see some of your scripts that you're working on come to screen. So I'm excited for you, Elan. Thank you so much for being
Thank
on the podcast.
you. Thank you. Sending you so much love to you and your listeners. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you. Thank you.